The kind folks over at Creality have sent over their new HALOT-MAGE Pro. This is their new 8K Resin 3D printer with a 10.3-inch LCD screen. It comes with a ton of new and improved features. Specifically, one that I love most is the Mega Arch, otherwise known as a flip-up lid. Normally you would have to take off the lid, put it somewhere, and trip over it a couple of times. And in this case, it's just simply flipping it up. It stays in place perfectly, and it is out of the way. It also has an automated resin feeding and retracting mechanism in it, simply just a pump that feeds in the resin and can also pull most of it back out into the bottle. Now, I'm not really sure if this is a feature that I love all that much. It does work, but it isn't really all that convenient for me. However, for some people it might be, depending on their needs. And if that wasn't enough, there is also a built-in air purifier, which purifies the air and reduces the smell of the resin. This all, of course, is good and well, but the most important and probably the main feature that makes this printer so interesting is the incredible speed that it is capable of printing at. This machine can print up to 170 millimeters an hour. That is, of course, 17 centimeters, and for you guys in inches, that is 6.7 inches. In order to use the speed of this printer to full capability, you will need the fast resin. Creality sent out a bottle of their new fast resin for me to use and also to showcase Dynax mode. Dynax mode is basically just the red key in your Dodge Challenger Hellcat, giving you all the power the machine has and giving it the speed that you want it to use. So if you want to use it at full capacity, be sure to turn on Dynax mode, and you could also go to Dynax mode Plus to go even faster and have the UV resin specifically for fast printing in there too. Otherwise it will give some problems as the resin is too thick and it can't really handle all the material going too fast and therefore giving failed prints, so be sure to use the fast resin. Now for this project, I'm going to be building one from Olivizzle. He has made a super nice file for the BAC Mono, and that is the one that I'm going to be printing on here. If you're interested to know more about the printer and or Oliver's files, I will be leaving links down below to the Creality website for the printer that you see me use here, and also the files to the BAC Mono from Olivizzle. So after I had set up the printer, leveled the bed, filled it up with resin, I did a first test print that went fine, nothing really important to show there, so I could just quickly move on to the important stuff, and that is printing the BAC Mono that I'm going to be building. So I'm going to be printing it at 0.01. That is the finest setting that I feel comfortable with and is basically good enough with a little bit of sanding to give a super nice and clean finish on most of the surfaces. So the body was printed in about 4.5 hours, where normally on my other resin printers at the same layer height that would take about 10 hours roughly. So that saves you a lot of time with the same quality and just gives it a super speedy result, and you can move on with your builds really quickly. Now, as you can see, there are very minimal layer lines. They look a bit rough on camera, but they aren't really all that bad, and there was a small bit of damage that I caused myself when removing the supports, but I simply just glued it back in place, and I need to sand that smooth before moving on. So overall, so far, I'm really happy with this printer. The speed is insane, and I can just basically print an entire body and start building it same day. So even though the layer lines are very minimal, again, they look a bit rough on camera, but with a small amount of sanding, they are pretty much gone within a matter of seconds. I took out a 400 grit sanding sponge from Tamiya and sanded the entire body down only once before moving into primer, and that pretty much fixed it. Now there were some areas here and there that I missed, so after primer I did sand it down again with a 600 just to make sure that it was nice and smooth, recoated it with another set of primer, and then moved on to color. The first parts have now been primed and could be moved on to the next stage, and that is applying various different colors. So I started off with some flat black on some areas, then moved on to some more flat black areas on the same part, and could then move on to some gunmetal. Now with the BAC Mono, you do have the option for a lot of carbon fiber, but I decided to keep this build simple and just sprayed it in a gunmetal. For the wheels, I decided to go for a gold color to nicely contrast with the body color that I decided on. And before applying the gold, I did do some black as a nice base to get it a darker color of gold and also to give it more of a metal-like finish. For the springs, I decided to go for a nice bright yellow, and for the main engine parts and exhaust pieces, silver was the color to go for. And with that said and done, I could then move on to the main body, which is going to be painted in a nice metallic red from Streetblisters, and this one is borrowed from the Ferrari stable, and that is Ferrari Rosso Monza. After covering all the hard to reach, easy to forget spots, it was then time to move on to the rest of the body. Now this color is covering incredibly well, but do keep in mind, since the body is resin and not plastic, I am capable of applying a little bit of a thicker coat in this case than I usually would on plastic. As with plastic, it bites into it, and you probably know all that by now. So with this resin body, I can go a little bit heavier, but not that much, as it's still a first coat, and I do want to get a nice flat coat to lay down for the rest of the coats to go on top of. But again, it is covering incredibly well and fast. I gave it a good 10 minutes to cure in between and then moved on to the second and final coat of color to achieve full coverage and a nice flat smooth finish. I let the body cure for about an hour, then mixed up some clear coat from number 5 to give it a nice glossy finish. Now I was debating on going for a matte finish, but then again I was also debating on painting the body in white, and none of those happened, so I figured a gloss finish for this red would really make it pop and really look good. And if I wanted to, I could just print another body and a small couple of parts and then paint that one in a flat white and simply just replace it for that one, but that's probably not going to happen. So I let the clear coat dry for a couple of days and then could move on to masking it all off in order to paint some areas flat black. With most of the parts now painted in their base colors, in this case a silver, there were some additional details that needs to be applied with a brush, as it's simply a lot simpler to do that with a brush than masking it off and painting it with the airbrush, so that is the way that I went. So some semi-gloss black, some flat black, some silver, and various other colors were then applied. With all of the detail painting now completed, I could start on the assembly. Now there isn't really an instruction manual for this kit, or not really, there is no instruction manual for this kit at all, but Oliver did give me the tip of starting with the rear transmission and suspension stuff, otherwise nothing else would fit, so I simply just put in one half, then put the other half in, slid the engine in place, then click them together in place, as they simply just fall in where they need to be with a little bit of persuasion, could add some glue and start assembling the rest. Now, since I'm keeping this build pretty simple and back to basics and only doing the necessary stuff to get a nice looking kit, I'm not going overboard with the details. I'm simply just painting it and assembling it and having a little bit of fun there. But you could, of course, also add some more seat belts and some details to the interior, or maybe, like I've said before, even a lot of carbon fiber to the exterior on all of the parts that you see here in the gunmetal gray. Now, for some strange reason, I had a little bit of a brain fart and couldn't really figure out how the exhaust needed to be routed and glued in place. So therefore, I broke off the rear muffler tip, and after doing that, I figured out that that wasn't necessary to get it in place, as I kind of thought that it would have needed to go in before the rear transmission stuff, but it didn't. So that's my mistake. Easily fixed though, and fully covered up with the body section that goes on top of it, but kind of dumb from my end. So at this point, all of the internal pieces have been glued in and the main body itself could be put on top. Now it is simply just hooked in place on one side, the fender then needs to be pulled out on the other, and the small hook grips underneath it, and that's pretty much it. You can use a lot of glue, but in this case it's not really necessary as it holds itself in there nice and tight. The wheels are then popped in place, and there is also an optional set of wheels as well, so you can decide between the standard one or the other standard one. I'm not really sure which one is the standard and which one is the optional, but on one side I've put one set and on the other side I've put the other set, and you can basically just pick and choose whichever one you want. I'm not really sure which one I like most. I think the multi-spoke wheel painted in one color, but then again, the others do look pretty cool as well. Now, as you can see right there, I did forget to pop in the headlights, and that needed to be done before putting on the body, so I took the body off again. Luckily, I didn't glue it in place, so I could simply just take it off, put the headlights in, pop the body back on, fit the rear spoiler and the rear view mirrors, and have this build completed. And there you have it. This build has now been completed. It is fully 3D printed, simply just sanded once or twice, not too much, on the Creality HALOT-MAGE Pro 8K. The printer and the resin were provided to me by Creality free of charge. I was not paid to say or do anything, but just showcase what I can do with one of these printers to you guys, and how easily it is to print your own kit and build it. Again, the files for this kit are from Olivizzle. He is my friend from Spain and has a super cool page on Cults 3D, and is worth a follow if you're interested in 3D printing and having some awesome designs. All of these things will be linked in the description down below. If you like these kinds of projects, do let me know in the comments down below, because I do have some other ones in the pipeline coming out soon, and I would really like to know how you guys would like to see these.